The war had been going on for 11 years. That was what the Galactic Coalition called it. 11 years. Neat. Manageable. A number that fit inside a report. But Ambassador Vale Oren of the Thessian Collective had stopped believing in neat numbers 3 years ago, when the Dreth Armada had burned the colony on Miran Prime down to glass, and kept moving. The Dreth did not negotiate. They did not demand territory or tribute or surrender. They moved through inhabited space like fire through dry grass, not because they wanted what was there, but because burning was what they did. 11 years. 412 coalition worlds, gone. Vale Oren stood at the floor-to-ceiling viewport of the Coalition Emergency Assembly on Thessia Station and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out past that beautiful dark, the Dreth front line was moving, eating, getting closer. His people had very good sensors. He could track the front on a map with alarming precision. It was 2 jumps away now. 2. The assembly chamber behind him was loud in the way that losing sounds, not panicked, not screaming, but filled with the hard-clipped voices of people who had already processed the fear and come out the other side into something colder. Generals, admirals, diplomats, species that had been enemies for centuries sitting in the same room because the alternative was disappearing species by species while they argued about borders. The Voreth line has collapsed. That was Fleet Admiral Sane Ka, a tall Myrathi female whose 4 hands were all pressed flat on the table in front of her. 4 hands, all of them still. That was how you knew she was scared. Her hands stopped moving. Completely. 17 battle groups. Gone in 6 hours. A sound ran through the room. Not a gasp. Too tired for gasps. More like a collective exhale of people having a number confirmed that they already suspected. The Dreth used a fold compression attack, Sane Ka continued. They collapsed local space at the center of our formation. Our ships were, she stopped, chose a word carefully, compressed. Meaning destroyed, said Representative Orath Vel of the Kethan, a small species who built excellent weapons and had been relying on that fact to stay relevant in these meetings. He was not small in personality. Meaning we lost 17 battle groups to a weapon we have no counter for. Meaning we have lost 17 battle groups to a weapon we have no counter for. Sane Ka confirmed. No apology in it. Just the truth, placed on the table like a stone. Vale Oren turned from the viewport. The room looked worse from the front. Everyone looked tired in a particular way. Not sleep-tired, but tired the way old metal gets tired. All the flex worked out of it, starting to become brittle. He had been in 612 of these emergency meetings in 11 years. He knew the math, he knew the map, he knew the rate at which the Dreth were moving and the rate at which the Coalition was losing ships and the horrible clean calculus that resulted from dividing one by the other. They had perhaps 18 months, maybe less, now that the Voreth line was gone. We need to contact the humans, he said. The room went quiet in a different way. Not the quiet of exhaustion, the quiet of a very large thing being said that everyone had been not saying for a very long time. We have been over this, said High Commander Drex of the Tulaki, a species that looked like someone had designed a predator from memory and gotten several details slightly wrong. Too many joints, eyes too far apart, voice like gravel in a metal drum. The humans have been contacted. 3 times they declined. They said they were not interested in joining the Coalition at this time, said Orath Vel, with the precise diction of someone who had memorized the exact wording of a refusal and found it personally offensive. At this time, as though they were declining a dinner invitation. That was before Miran, Vale Oren said. Before the Voreth line. Before we lost 400 Coalition worlds. He walked to the center of the room. His legs ached. They always ached now. The humans have been watching this war for 11 years. They know what the Dreth are. They know what happens to species that fall behind the front line. They also declined our requests for military technology transfer, said Sane Ka. Their response to our 3rd formal request was, she pulled up a document. Read it, set it down. They said they did not feel the Coalition's current strategic doctrine was compatible with their military technology, whatever that means. It means they think we fight badly, said Admiral Prensola, an old Ithali whose scales had gone pale at the edges, which was how his species showed age. He said it without malice. He had been saying it in various ways for 4 years, and they are not wrong. We fight like 11 different species, who have been trying to kill each other for centuries, and have only recently decided to cooperate. Because that is exactly what we are. No one argued with him. Outside, somewhere, the Dreth front ate another 3 light-years of space. At the current rate, statistically, per hour. There is one option we have not formally put to the assembly, Valoran said. He looked around the room, made eye contact with Sain-Ka, who looked back at him with an expression that meant she knew what he was about to say, and had already decided she would not stop him. We do not ask them to join us, he said. We do not ask them for technology. We do not invite them to a coalition summit. We contact them and we tell them the truth, that we are losing, that we have 18 months, perhaps less, that the Dreth front line will reach human space in approximately 4 years at current rate of advance, and by then, there will be nothing left in their path to slow it down. He paused. We ask them for help, plainly, as one living species to another. The room was quiet again. High Commander Drex made a sound deep in his chest that was not quite a laugh. The humans will not respond to an emotional appeal. Maybe not, Valoran said, but I would like to know what they respond to. The signal took 6 days to reach human space. Valoran spent those 6 days reading everything the Coalition's intelligence files contained on humanity. He had read some of it before. The broad strokes, the diplomatic summaries, the sanitized version that the Coalition's first contact teams had assembled 40 years ago, when humanity joined the network of known species as a quiet, curious newcomer from a small planet orbiting an unremarkable star. He read the other files now. The ones that were not sanitized. Humanity had discovered faster-than-light travel 63 years before first contact with the Coalition. In 63 years, working alone, with no external guidance and no access to galactic infrastructure, they had gone from burning chemical rockets to fold space drives. 63 years. The Thessians had taken 400. The Myrathi, the oldest species in the Coalition, had taken 900. He read the record of humanity's early expansion, the planets they had settled, the resources they had developed, the infrastructure they had built, and then he noticed the thing that no one in the diplomatic summaries ever talked about, the thing that sat underneath all the other numbers like a foundation you weren't supposed to look at directly. Humanity had been at war with itself for most of its history. Not small wars, not border skirmishes, the kind of wars that reshaped geography, rerouted rivers, removed mountains, erased cities. The kind of wars that a species should not have survived. They had survived anyway and then done it again, and again, learning from each one. Not to stop fighting, but to fight more efficiently, more completely. To build weapons that scaled from personal violence all the way up to continent scale. To study the theory and practice of organized destruction the way other species studied medicine or mathematics. They had stopped fighting each other, eventually, mostly. Redirected. The Coalition intelligence files were very careful about how they described the human military. Words like significant and notable and considerable appeared frequently. Numbers appeared less frequently. Valoran noticed that the files were more detailed about humanity's culture, biology, and economic systems than they were about their weapons, their fleet size, their doctrine. It was the kind of gap that only appeared when someone had looked at a set of numbers and decided, at a high level, that putting them in a document was unwise. On the 6th day, the response came back. A human, a woman with the permanent squint of someone who spent a lot of time looking at things far away. She introduced herself as Director Chen of Humanity's External Affairs Division. She had listened to Valoran's message, she said. She had passed it to the relevant people. She asked him one question. Ambassador, when you say you're losing, can you be more specific? What does the front line actually look like right now? We'd like current tactical data, not press releases. All of it. That was the question. Just that. Valoran sent the data. He sent all of it. The maps, the casualty figures, the weapon analyses, the timeline projections, the reports that had never been shared publicly because publishing them would have caused panic on 100 worlds. He sent the assessment that the Coalition's own strategists had written 6 months ago, the one that said in plain language, at current trajectory, this war cannot be won. He sent the numbers behind the Vorith collapse, the ones that showed how completely and efficiently the Dreth fold compression weapon had annihilated 17 battle groups. He sent all of it and waited. The response came back in 4 days. No video, just text. It said, "We're sending a ship. It will arrive at Thessia Station in 12 days. Do not interfere with its approach or attempt to scan it. One ship." This is not a declaration of war against the Dreth. Not yet. Consider it an evaluation. Valoran read the message 3 times. He went to find Sane Ka. She read it once. 1 ship, she said. 1 ship, he confirmed. She was quiet for a moment. Her 4 hands moved, not the flat stillness of fear, but something else. Fingers tapping once, twice, against the table. Thinking hands. Did they say what kind of ship? No. Did they say who would be on it? No. Did they specify what they mean by evaluation? No. Sane Ka sat back, looked at the message again. 1 ship, she said. A 3rd time, and this time it sounded less like a question and more like a prayer she wasn't sure she believed in yet. 12 days felt like a very long time. It also felt like the first deadline in 11 years that Valoran found himself wanting to reach. Outside the station, the stars were very still. The Dreth front moved in the dark, 2 jumps away, eating. The Coalition held its remaining worlds and its remaining ships, and its remaining 18 months like a man holding a door shut against something very large, waiting to see what arrived before the door gave way. 1 ship. The humans were sending 1 ship. Valoran went to sleep for the first time in 3 days, not because he was hopeful exactly, but because something had shifted. Some small, cold thing at the center of his chest had changed its temperature by a fraction of a degree. He did not know yet what to call that feeling. He would have called it the beginning of something if he had known how to name beginnings anymore. It came out of fold space 11 days early. That was the first thing that nobody knew what to do with. The message had said 12 days. 12 days was the timeline every admiral and station commander and nervous Coalition bureaucrat had organized their anxiety around. At 12 days there would be a formal reception. There would be a docking protocol. Valoran had written a short speech. The human ship arrived in 11 days and ignored all of that completely. The station's sensors picked it up the moment it dropped into normal space. Or rather, the sensors tried to pick it up, ran into something they could not fully process, and returned data that the sensor operators stared at for several minutes before calling their supervisors. Then their supervisors stared at it. Then Admiral Sane Ka was woken up at what passed for 0300 on a station that did not technically have nights, and she stood in the sensor bay in her off-duty robe, with her 4 hands wrapped around a heated cup of something, and looked at the data herself. The ship was big. That was the first clear thing the data gave her. Big in a way that made the numbers feel wrong. Her mind kept trying to recalculate, kept offering her the suggestion that there must be a unit error, that the decimals were misplaced. But the numbers were not misplaced. The object sitting at the edge of the station's sensor range was approximately 9 kilometers long. Standard Mirathi battle carriers, the largest ships currently in Coalition service, ran 4 kilometers on the main hull. Standard Dreth command ships, the largest things Sane Ka had ever seen on a tactical display, ran approximately 5. 9 kilometers. The second thing the data gave her, after she had processed the size, was the age. She had to run the material analysis twice, because the first result seemed like an error. The hull composition was human-made, yes. She could identify the base compounds. But the wear patterns on the outer surface, the micro-impacts, the radiation scoring, the structural stress lines recorded in the metal itself, told a story that started a very long time ago. The ship had been in space for at minimum, and this was the analysis being conservative, being careful, 180 years. The Coalition had known humanity for 40 years. This ship was older than their acquaintance by a century and 40 years. "It's old," said the senior sensor operator, a Thessian named Veth, who had been doing this job for 20 years and had stopped being surprised by most things long ago. He was surprised now. His ears were flat. "Fleet Admiral, this ship is—" "I can read the data," Sane Ka said. She looked at the silhouette the sensors had assembled. Long, heavy, not elegant, the opposite of elegant, layered, like something that had been built, and then rebuilt again, each reconstruction adding mass and weaponry and armor, without much regard for the aesthetics of the previous version. It had the shape of a thing that had been through situations that required it to be rebuilt, and had emerged from each one with a strong preference for not going back. There were scars on the hull, real ones, long gouges and burn patterns and, in one section near the midship, what looked like a section of hull plating that had been replaced so many times the replacement plating was itself scarred and had been patched in turn. Sane-Ka had seen battle damage on ships her entire career. She had never seen battle damage that old. "Get Ambassador Vale Oren," she said. Vale Oren arrived in the sensor bay 7 minutes later. He looked at the data. He looked at the silhouette. He looked at the age analysis. "Have they communicated?" he asked. "One signal," said Veth. "Text only. Came in 30 seconds after they dropped from fold space." He pulled it up. It said, "Requesting docking clearance. ISV Carthage, out of Seoul. Please confirm bay size. We will need something that fits 9 kilometers of hull length and has appropriate clearance overhead. Also, please confirm you have a berth rated for a ship of this mass. If not, we can anchor at range and use shuttles." Vale Oren read it twice. The phrasing, the complete absence of ceremony, requesting docking clearance the way a cargo transport requested docking clearance. "Please confirm bay size. Please confirm you have a berth rated for this mass." As though the question of whether the station could accommodate them was a logistical detail. As though they had not just folded into system 11 days ahead of schedule, in a 9-kilometer warship that was older than the Coalition's relationship with humanity. "Send them Bay 12, he said, "the one we use for large cargo carriers." "Bay 12 will not fit 9 kilometers, Veth said. "Tell them that. Ask them for their preference." The reply came back in under 2 minutes. "Anchor at range is fine. We'll take shuttles in. Please have one of your senior people available. Captain Marin Holt would like to speak with whoever is in charge of asking for help." Sane-Ka made a sound that was not quite a laugh, and not quite the opposite of one. "Marin Holt," Vale Oren said. "That's the captain?" Apparently, Sane-Ka set down her cup. 4 hands all moving now. Alert hands, engaged hands, the hands of someone whose mind was working fast and finding traction. "I'll want our best tactical analysts in that meeting, and someone from intelligence, and..." She stopped. "Do we know anything about the Carthage? Is it in any of our files on the human military?" Veth had already been searching. He shook his head slowly. "Nothing under that name. There's a reference in a 40-year-old cultural exchange document to something called the ISV program, Interstellar Vessel, which was apparently humanity's original designation for ships designed for deep space before they joined the network. But that program was listed as," he read carefully, "largely retired." "Largely," Sane-Ka said. "Largely," Veth confirmed. They both looked at the silhouette on the display. 9 kilometers of scarred, rebuilt, ancient human warship, sitting in the dark outside a station that could not fit it, politely offering to use shuttles. Largely retired. The shuttle that came from the Carthage was a small thing, flat and angular, with the same layered repair aesthetic as the mothership, patches on top of patches, but each patch done cleanly, competently, like someone who understood that beautiful and functional were 2 different priorities, and had made their peace with that. It docked with a precision that Sane-Ka noticed. She always watched how a crew docked. It told you something. This crew docked like people who did not need to think about it. The captain of the ISV Carthage was a woman. That was not a surprise. Humanity had all the same variations in leadership that any species did. What Sane-Ka noticed was not what the captain was, but how she moved. Captain Marin Holt was older than Sane-Ka had expected. Gray at the edges of dark hair, lines at the corners of eyes that were very steady and very dark. She moved through the docking corridor with the particular economy of someone who had spent a lot of time in spaces that did not have room for unnecessary movement. Small ship energy in a woman who apparently commanded 9 kilometers of warship. She had brought 2 people. One was a tall man who carried himself like a weapon someone had set down carefully on a surface and expected to pick up again shortly. The other was a younger woman with the kind of still face that meant she was processing everything and sharing none of it. Marin Holt looked at Vale Oren first, then Sane-Ka. She did not perform warmth and she did not perform aggression. She simply assessed, openly, the way someone assesses a situation they walked into with incomplete information. "Ambassador," she said. Her translator rendered it cleanly. "Captain Marin Holt," Vale Oren said. "Thank you for the data you sent," she said. "The full tactical picture. That was the right call. Anyone who'd sent us the press release version," she did not finish that sentence, "did not need to. We'd like to walk through it with your senior commanders. All of it. The Vorith collapse specifically. We've been looking at the fold compression weapon data since you sent it, and we have questions. Senka's translator caught this. She processed it. You've been analyzing our tactical data. For 12 days, Marin said, before we left. Why else would you send it? She seemed genuinely puzzled for a moment. Not rude, just operating from a different assumption about what information was for. We don't respond to emergencies, and then learn about the situation after we arrive. We learned what we could, we left, we kept working in transit. She looked around the docking bay, noticed the scorch patterns on the bay walls from old accidents, the repair stripes, the layered history of a station that had been built in segments over decades. She had the expression of someone who recognized that particular kind of history. Can we find somewhere with a large display? We'd like to show you what we're thinking. Valoran said yes. They walked. In the corridor, Marin second, the tall man, who had introduced himself simply as Commander Solis, fell into step beside Senka. He looked at the battle schematics on her tactical pad. She was not deliberately showing them, but she had not hidden them either. The formation they hit at Voreth, he said quietly. Your ships were spread too wide. We were attempting to maximize sensor coverage, Senka said. Coverage doesn't matter if the Dreth can collapse the space your ships are sitting in. He said it without cruelty, just flat. A thing he had looked at and formed a view on. You were optimizing for a threat model that didn't account for this weapon. We did not know about this weapon before Voreth. Right. He nodded. That's the other problem we want to talk about. He did not elaborate. Senka spent the rest of the walk to the briefing room turning that sentence over in her mind. That's the other problem. The implication being there was more than one. The implication being he had a list. The briefing room's main display lit up. Marin pulled up the tactical map. The Coalition's 18 months stared at them from the display, color-coded, annotated, the whole shape of a losing war spread out in lights across the dark. Valoran had looked at this map so many times, it had stopped meaning anything to him. He knew that was dangerous. He had been unable to stop it. Marin looked at it like she was looking at it for the first time, and something in her face was not despair, and was not hope, but was much more useful than either. All right, she said, here's what we see. The room went very quiet. For the next 3 hours, the human captain and her 2 officers took the Coalition's 11-year war apart, like engineers examining a broken machine, not looking for someone to blame, not offering comfort, just looking at the pieces, asking where they failed, asking why, building up from the facts towards something that might be a different conclusion. Valoran watched Senka's 4 hands during this. For most of the first hour they were still, the stillness of someone having confirmed fears. Then, somewhere in the second hour, they started to move, slowly, thinking hands again. She was finding traction. He did not want to call it hope. It was too early for hope, and he had learned what happened to hope that arrived too early. But the room was different by the 3rd hour. The air in it sat differently. Something had entered that had not been there before. The Carthage waited in the dark outside, 180 years of scars in its hull, built for something, ready for something, patient in the way that only very old things can be patient, not serene but settled, like a thing that has seen a great deal, and is simply waiting to see what comes next. 1 ship, 11 years of losing, 3 hours of a human captain who looked at their map and said, "Here's what we see." And meant it. It was not enough. Not yet. Not nearly. But it was a different morning than yesterday had been. That was something. That was, Valoran thought, exactly enough to sleep on. The Dreth scouts arrived on the 5th day. 3 ships. Fast, small, the kind the Dreth used to locate Coalition concentrations before the main fleet moved. Senka's sensors caught them 3 light hours out, moving on a vector that would bring them past Thesia Station, at a range where they could collect data on anything docked or anchored in the system. They would see the Carthage. That was the immediate problem, because the Carthage had still not done anything. It had been sitting at anchor for 5 days, shuttling people and equipment to the station, participating in briefings, asking questions, taking in data. Marin had eaten 2 meals in the station's diplomatic cafeteria, had politely declined all formal receptions, and had spent most of her station-side hours in the tactical center, going through the Coalition's entire operational history of the war, with the same systematic attention she had given it on the first day. Nobody on the Coalition side had pressed her for a plan. Nobody had asked what the Carthage was going to do. Partly because they had been told not to push humans on timelines. The cultural notes all agreed on that. Partly because Vale Oren had a strong instinct that pushing Marin Holt on anything she hadn't decided to share yet would close a door that was currently open, and open doors were precious. But 3 Dreth scouts on approach changed the arithmetic. Sane Ka sent a shuttle to the Carthage, not an urgent signal, not an emergency broadcast, a shuttle, with a message from her personally, which said, "We have incoming Dreth scouts, 3, lightly armed, standard reconnaissance type. They will pass through sensor range in approximately 4 hours. Your vessel will be visible to them, advising you in case this affects your plans. Sane Ka." The reply came back in 11 minutes. "Received. Thank you for the warning. We'll handle it. Please ask your ships not to move toward the scouts. Stay in current positions. Carthage out." Sane Ka read this on the bridge of her own command ship, read it twice, and then asked her comms officer to confirm that the message had not been corrupted in transit. It had not. She ordered her ships to hold position. She then very carefully did not call Vale Oren, because she had a feeling that whatever was about to happen was the kind of thing that should be witnessed without commentary, and she wanted to be able to describe it accurately to the assembly afterward, without whatever she would have said beforehand getting in the way. The next 4 hours were quiet. The Dreth scouts came in on their standard approach. The coalition ships held position, which the scouts clearly noticed. Their formation adjusted slightly, the small reflex of prey animals that have moved, and found that the larger things in the environment have not moved in response. The scouts kept coming. They were almost certainly noting the large anomalous object anchored off the station and trying to categorize it. Dreth intelligence gathering was good. They would be recording everything. The Carthage came online at the 2-hour mark. Not weapons, not engines, nothing dramatic, but every passive system on every coalition ship in the area registered a pulse from the old human ship that suggested it had gone from a state of presence to a state of attention. The difference between a large animal sleeping and a large animal that has opened its eyes. The scouts noticed. Their formation tightened. They adjusted approach vector, still coming, but recalculating. Sane Ka watched her sensor displays. At the 1-hour mark, the Carthage moved. Not fast. Nothing about a 9-kilometer ship moved fast at short notice, but it moved with the unhurried deliberateness of something that had decided to be somewhere and was now going there. It changed from anchor position to an intercept angle. Not aggressive, not chasing, just repositioning in a way that put it between the scouts and the station. The scouts stopped advancing. This was unusual. Sane Ka had never seen Dreth scouts stop. Their operational doctrine was to record and withdraw, but stopping was not part of the pattern. They were stopped, she realized after a moment, because they were looking at the Carthage and running their own analysis, and whatever their analysis was telling them was making them uncertain. The Carthage's comms came alive, not a signal to the station. A direct signal to the Dreth scouts, open band, translated into Dreth comms format. Sane Ka's systems picked it up because they were listening for everything. It was not a threat, it was not a demand, it was a statement. It said, "This system is under our protection. You are advised to withdraw." Just that, no additional context, no elaboration on who we were or what protection meant, or what would happen if the scouts declined the advice. Just the statement, delivered flatly, in the Dreth comms format that indicated a communication from a superior military to an inferior one. The scouts held position for 6 minutes, and then they turned around. Sane Ka had been in this war for 11 years. She had lost 4 battle groups. She had watched the front line eat 400 coalition worlds. She had not, in 11 years, seen Dreth scouts simply turn around before completing a reconnaissance pass. She sat in her command chair for a very long time. Then she called Vale Oren. "The scouts left," she said. "I saw," he said. He sounded like someone processing something large by taking it in very small pieces. Marin Holt just signaled. "She wants to meet this evening." The meeting was in the same briefing room as before. Marin Holt had brought both her officers again. She had also brought 3 others, specialists, Solis had called them, without specifying what they specialized in. One of them was very young, and spent the pre-meeting time looking at the star maps with an expression of pure, focused intensity that made him seem slightly separate from the rest of the room. "The scouts will report back," Marin Holt said, when everyone was seated. Not preamble, not pleasantries, just the next piece of the situation. Whatever they recorded, whatever their analysis said, Dreth Command will have it within 2 days. Then they'll decide how to respond. How do you expect them to respond? Valoran asked. They'll send something bigger, she said it without drama. We blocked a reconnaissance pass on a system they want data on. That produces a response. What we're trying to figure out is the size of the response. She looked at Solis. He pulled up a tactical display. Based on what you've shared about Dreth operational patterns, and based on what we observed of the scouts' behavior after the repositioning, we think they flagged the Carthage as an unknown class vessel of significant size, and logged the system as requiring a heavier assessment before main fleet commitment. He moved through the display. That's useful. It buys time, but not a lot. They'll want to know what they're looking at. What will they see when they look? Seinka asked, a question she had been waiting to ask since the scouts left. She did not make her voice careful around it, because she had decided to stop being careful around the humans in these meetings. They did not respond well to careful questions. They responded to direct ones. Marin Holt looked at her steadily. They'll see a ship that was built for what they're doing, she said. The Carthage isn't a standard vessel. It was built during our own period of large-scale war. Back when humanity was still the only threat humanity knew. We didn't know aliens existed yet. We built it because we needed a platform that could survive extended conflict in a contested environment, without resupply, without support, without backup. One ship, self-sufficient, capable of operating in a hostile system alone for months. She paused. Then we met the rest of you, and for a while we didn't think we needed it anymore. The words anymore landed in the room. It was in what we call mothball storage, said Solis. Preserved but inactive. We reactivated it 4 years ago. 4 years ago, Valoran repeated. When did... He stopped. Did the calculation. 4 years ago was when the Dreth front had crossed the 500 light-year mark, when the trajectory had become unmistakably pointed at human space. You reactivated it because you were tracking the war. We were tracking the war, Marin Holt confirmed. We've been tracking it since it started. We're not... She chose her words here, carefully, for the first time. We're not an impulsive species, Ambassador. We look at things for a long time before we act. That isn't passivity. It's a different kind of engagement. And now you're here. And now we're here. Valoran looked at the Carthage's silhouette on the tactical display. 180 years old. Built during humanity's own wars. Reactivated 4 years ago and apparently kept ready. Prepared, worked on, while the coalition bled out across hundreds of worlds. He wanted to ask why. Why wait? Why not come earlier, when the Dreth front was farther, when there were more coalition worlds to save, when the math was not this bad? He wanted to say this and did not, because he had looked at the intelligence files, and he had read the history, and he understood, in the abstract, the answer, even if the answer cost him something he was not ready to name. Humanity had watched, assessed, waited to understand what they were dealing with before they dealt with it. 11 years. He did not say any of this. He said, "What do you need from us?" Marin Holt's list was specific. Not long. 10 items. Each one concrete, each one something the coalition could actually provide. Tactical data on the fold compression weapon's observable signature before detonation. Full sensor logs from every Dreth engagement in the last 4 years. Access to any captured Dreth material, however small. A direct channel to each of the species' fleet commands, bypassing the coalition bureaucracy. And one thing that made the room go still for a moment. She wanted the coalition ships to stay out of what came next. Not permanently, she said, and not because we don't value the fleet, but what we're going to do needs to be done a specific way, and the specific way involves the Dreth focusing on the Carthage. If your ships are present, that changes their targeting calculus. They'll split attention. We don't want that. You want them to focus on one target, Seinka said. We want them focused on the correct target, Marin Holt said. There was a difference in there. Seinka heard it and did not immediately know what to do with it, which was its own kind of information. The young specialist, he had been introduced as Lieutenant Kale, looked up from the star maps for the first time in 30 minutes. He had been making small marks on a tablet, working something out. When he looked up, his eyes were clear, and his expression was the specific expression of someone who has solved the smaller of two problems and is ready to move to the larger one. The fold compression weapon uses local space density. he said. The Dreth collapse it at a central point. Everything within radius is pulled inward. He turned his tablet so the room could see. The critical factor is the density calculation. They map the target zone first. Their scouts are mapping it. Every pass. They need a clean map to fire accurately. Senka looked at the tablet, then at Marin Holt. "You're going to give them an inaccurate map," she said. The corner of Marin Holt's mouth moved, not quite a smile. Something more considered than a smile. "We're going to give them a very accurate map," she said, "of something that isn't where they think it is." The briefing room was quiet. Outside, the Carthage sat in the dark and waited, patient as old metal, carrying 180 years of scars and the long knowledge of a species that had learned war the way some species learn art, not as an interruption to ordinary life, but as a discipline, practiced, refined, passed down, a thing worked at until it was no longer brutal and had become something else. Senka's 4 hands were all moving now, all at once, thinking so fast her hands could not keep up. 2 jumps away, the Dreth front ate its steady measure of space per hour. Above it, probably, a signal was already traveling toward Dreth Command, reporting an unknown vessel in the Thesia system, reporting that the scouts had been made uncertain enough to withdraw. The response would come. Marin Holt was counting on it. That, Senka thought, was the part she had not yet decided how to feel about. The humans were not here to defend Thesia Station. They were here to do something far more dangerous. They were here to be found. The Dreth sent 22 ships. Not scouts, not a probe, a full assessment force, the kind of formation they committed when they had logged an unknown variable and wanted to eliminate the uncertainty by killing whatever had caused it. Senka's long-range sensors picked them up 40 hours after the scouts had turned around, dropping from fold space at a measured distance, assembling into battle formation before they advanced. Organized, deliberate. The Dreth were not careless in how they approached unknowns. 22 ships. One of them was a command vessel, the elongated spine and strut shape that the Coalition had learned to read as headquarters. The others were a mix. 6 heavy assault ships, 8 midweight weapons platforms, 4 fold compression units, and 4 of the screening ships the Dreth used to protect the fold compression units while they mapped and charged. 4 fold compression units. Senka looked at this number and felt the particular cold that came with it. 4 of those weapons had destroyed the Voreth line in 6 hours. The Dreth had sent 4 of them to deal with 1 unknown ship. She called Marin Holt. 22, she said, when the line opened. 4 fold compression units. "We see them," Marin Holt said. Her voice was exactly the same as it had been in every briefing for the past week. "Are your ships positioned as we discussed?" Senka's fleet was 3 light hours away, behind a gas giant's magnetic shadow. Sensors passive, close enough to respond, far enough not to be included in the fold compression unit's targeting map. The Coalition forces had spent the last 40 hours doing exactly what the humans had asked, and it had cost Senka something that she was fairly sure was visible in her face. Standing back was not a thing she had ever been good at. "We're in position," she said. "Stay there until you hear from us," Marin Holt said. "Captain," she chose words, 4 fold compression units. If they get a clean map and fire simultaneously, "I know what 4 simultaneous fold compression events at this range would do," Marin Holt said. Still the same voice. "We've known since we got the data. We planned for it." A pause that was not hesitation. It was the pause of someone deciding how much to explain. "The Carthage has been in situations like this before, Ambassador. Different weapons, same math. We know what we're doing." The line closed. Senka sat in her command chair and watched the tactical display, and kept her hands very still. The Dreth came in, at standard approach for a combat assessment. Not a charge, not cautious, but the measured advance of a force that had looked at the numbers, and decided the numbers were comfortable. 22 ships against 1. Even an unknown one. The Dreth understood superior numbers. What they could see of the Carthage from this distance matched what the scouts had reported. A large, old vessel, heavy, apparently stationary. No obvious weapon signatures active, no fleet support. Nothing moving in the immediate system except the small activity of a station at normal operation. The fold compression units began their mapping pass. This was standard. Before the weapons could fire accurately, they needed a density map of the target space, precise measurements of local gravitational and spatial conditions. The mapping process took approximately 40 minutes for a target of this size at this range. During that time, the 4 units spread to their optimal positions around the target zone, running their sensor pulses, building the map. The Carthage did nothing. It sat where it had been sitting for a week, taking up space, looking like a very large, very patient object. 12 minutes into the mapping pass, the Carthage moved. Not far, not fast. Just a slow, deliberate drift on a new vector. Still within the area the fold compression units were mapping, but in a different position within it. The Dreth Assessment Force's formation adjusted fractionally, tracking. The fold compression units continued their mapping pass. The map was being built around wherever the Carthage currently was. 20 minutes in, the Carthage moved again. Same pattern, same pace. Drifted to a new position within the map zone. Sane-Ka watched this from behind the gas giant and understood, slowly, what she was looking at. The Carthage was making the Dreth map it in the wrong place. Not dramatically wrong, not enough to be obvious, just off. Every time the fold compression units had built a substantial portion of their map, the Carthage moved, and the map had to account for the new position. The units were not starting over. They were updating, adjusting, incorporating the new data, but every adjustment built on the previous ones, and the previous ones had been built when the Carthage was somewhere slightly different. Lieutenant Kale had said it, in the briefing. A very accurate map of something that isn't where they think it is. Sane-Ka's 4 hands moved, slow this time, the movement of someone understanding a thing they had not expected to understand. The Dreth command ship's comms broadcast was tight enough that the Coalition sensors at this distance could only catch fragments, but the fragments told a story. Orders. Formation adjustment. The command vessel moving slightly. Repositioning. The Dreth commander looking at the map his fold compression units were building and making decisions based on it. At 38 minutes, the Carthage stopped moving. The fold compression units ran 2 more minutes of mapping. Then the commander gave the order. All 4 fired simultaneously. The fold compression event was enormous. Even from 3 light hours away, Sane-Ka's passive sensors registered the spatial distortion, a shockwave in the local fabric of space that rolled outward from the target point in a sphere of collapsing geometry. It was terrible to look at. She had seen what it did at Vorith. She knew what she was looking at. The target point was empty. The Carthage was not there. How far it had moved in those final 2 minutes. 2 minutes that the Dreth's map did not account for because the map had been finished, and the commander had committed, and the Dreth did not recalculate once committed. Sane-Ka could not measure exactly from her distance, but it was far enough. The fold compression event collapsed empty space. The Dreth formation's response to this was 3 seconds of stillness. Communications flying between ships. The command vessel broadcasting hard. The fold compression units beginning an emergency reload sequence. The Carthage opened fire. Sane-Ka had been expecting weapons. She had seen human weapon specifications. Or rather, she had seen the summaries that acknowledged human weapons existed and declined to be specific about them. She had extrapolated from what she knew: hull size, power plant readings, the visible external hardpoints. She had been wrong in the way that people are wrong when they extrapolate from what they have seen. What the Carthage fired was not a beam, and was not a missile, and was not any weapon system in the Coalition's catalogs. The closest analog her sensors could find was a compressed matter round, but the compression ratios made no sense. The amounts were wrong by orders of magnitude, like comparing a stone thrown by hand to a geological event. The first round went through the leading Dreth heavy assault ship the way a thrown rock goes through still water, except that what came out the other side was a sensor anomaly that lasted for 0.4 seconds and then resolved into a debris field. The Carthage fired again. One of the fold compression units. The Dreth formation broke. This was the remarkable thing, not the 2 destroyed ships, because the Dreth absorbed losses without breaking. They had done it for 11 years against Coalition forces. But the formation actually broke. The screening ships scattered. The remaining fold compression units aborted their reload sequences and began retreat vectors. The command vessel was broadcasting on multiple frequencies, urgent tones even through translation, and turning, not charging, not reorganizing, turning. The Carthage did not chase. It fired one more time, precisely. The second fold compression unit, which was moving slower than the others due to its reload sequence, caught the round at mid-turn. It came apart in a way that left a debris field and a spatial distortion signature that Sane Ka's analysts would spend the next 2 days studying. Then the Carthage stopped firing. The surviving Dreth ships were in full retreat. 19 ships, pulling back to fold distance, disappearing into FTL in groups as they reached safe jump range. The command vessel last, broadcasting the whole time, broadcasting back toward Dreth space, Sane Ka realized, not communicating with the retreating fleet, sending a report home. The Dreth commander was making a report. The Carthage let them go. Sane Ka held position for 7 minutes after the last Dreth ship jumped. Then she called Marin Holt. "You let them go," she said. "Yes," Marin Holt said. "They'll report everything, every sensor reading they got, everything they know about your weapons now." "Yes," Marin Holt said again. "That doesn't concern you." There was a pause. Not long. "It concerns me," Marin Holt said. "The question is whether it concerns me more than the alternative." She paused again. "If we'd destroyed the command vessel, there would be no report. No one would know what happened here. Dreth Command would eventually send a second assessment force, and they'd have no more information than the first one had. We'd do this again." Her voice was steady, explanatory. "If we let the command vessel go, they send a report. Dreth Command has to process what happened. A 22-ship assessment force sent to eliminate an unknown vessel, and the unknown vessel reduced it to 19 ships and left." Another pause. "We need them to know we're here, Ambassador. We need them to have to decide what to do about us." Sane Ka processed this. "You want them to come back," she said. "I want them to send more than 22 ships," Marin Holt said. "I want them to send enough ships that when we do what we do next, they feel it at the command level. Not a local setback. A strategic problem." The line was very quiet for a moment. "This is not a defense," Sane Ka said, slowly, making sure of the words. "What you're doing, you're not defending this system." "No," Marin Holt said. "We're not. You're fighting the war differently." The pause that followed was the longest one. "Ambassador," Marin Holt said, "you've been fighting defensively for 11 years, holding lines, losing lines, holding the next line back. The Dreth understand that model. They've been beating it consistently. What they're not set up for, what their command structure is not designed to process, is a threat that comes at them." Her voice did not change, had not changed from the beginning, but there was something underneath it now, like the deep vibration that precedes a sound too low to hear. "We're not here to hold the line. We're here to give them something that worries them more than the line." Sane Ka looked at the tactical display. 19 Dreth ships in retreat, 2 destroyed, 4 fold compression weapons reduced to 2, one of those in unknown operational status. 1 ship. The Carthage had done this with 1 ship. "What do you need?" she said. It was not a question the way it had been when Valoran asked it. It was something closer to a covenant. "I need your fleet back," Marin Holt said. "Not to fight, not yet, but positioned where they can be seen. I need the Dreth to know that there is a coalition fleet here, and that the unknown vessel is in addition to it, not instead of it." Her voice was precise, certain. "I need them to understand that the math is different now." 2 light-years away, a Dreth command vessel was burning hard for fold distance, and its commander was composing a report that had no precedent in 11 years of this war. A single vessel of unknown class. Hull configuration registered as archaic. Capability of registered hull class, wildly inconsistent with observed performance. 2 heavy assets destroyed in 70 seconds of engagement. Fold compression mapping evaded through target displacement behavior, consistent with deliberate counter-tactic. The commander noted this last detail twice. It was the detail that had taken the certainty out of him and replaced it with something he did not have comfortable words for. They had anticipated the fold compression weapon. They had planned for it. Whatever was on that ship had looked at the coalition's worst defeat and built a counter for it before the battle started. Whatever was on that ship had known what the fold compression units would do, and had moved in a way that made that knowledge a trap. 11 years. 11 years, and the coalition had never done that, had never adapted that fast, had never walked into a fight already knowing what the Dreth's best weapon would attempt. The commander finished the report, sent it toward home, and for the first time in 11 years of conquest, wondered what the response would say. The Dreth sent 211 ships. They came in 4 waves over 36 hours, not all at once, which was unusual, which meant they were being careful in a way the Dreth had not been careful in 11 years. Which meant the report had reached command and command had looked at it, and done something that Dreth Command did not typically do. They had thought about it. Sane Ka watched the first wave arrive on her long-range sensors and felt the particular cold of large numbers moving in her direction. And then, underneath it, a different feeling. One she did not trust yet. One she held at arm's length because she had been burned by it before. The Dreth had sent 211 ships. The coalition fleet behind the gas giant had 47. The Carthage was 1. 48 against 211. By every calculation that had governed this war for 11 years, those numbers meant exactly one thing. Marinholtz's voice on the channel was clear and unhurried. We see the first wave. They're staging, not advancing yet. Staging means they're waiting for the others, Sane Ka said. They're waiting to see if we run, Marinholtz said. They want to know if the numbers change our behavior, whether we pull back or hold. Do we hold? A pause that was not uncertainty. We hold, but I need your fleet on the display. Active sensors, full power. Let them see everything you have. I want them looking at 47 coalition ships plus the Carthage, and deciding what that means. Sane Ka brought her fleet out from behind the gas giant. The Dreth first wave responded to this the way a large animal responds to something it did not expect to still be there. A pause, a recalibration of the situation. Their formation adjusted, tighter. The 211 ships were still assembling, the waves still arriving, but the advance had not started. They were looking. This is what you wanted, Valoran said. He had stayed on the station, at Marinholtz's request, coordinating the assembly's observation of the engagement. His voice on the channel was the voice of a man doing arithmetic he was not sure he liked. You wanted them to send enough that their command had to care about the outcome. Their command already cares, Marinholtz said. The report from the assessment force made sure of that. What we need now is for this engagement to cost them enough that the people who sent 211 ships have to explain themselves. A pause. What we need is for winning to hurt. And if they overwhelm us? Valoran asked. Then we make it the most expensive win they've had in 11 years, she said. Either result works for us, but I don't think they're going to win. The tactical display showed the Dreth completing assembly. All 4 waves arrived, formed up, the full 211 ships in a broad attack formation. The fold compression units were there. Sane Ka counted 22 of them, 5 times what the assessment force had brought. They had learned the lesson. 1 counter was a tactic. 22 were a saturating problem. 22 fold compression units. That was the problem that Sane Ka had been carrying since the formation data came through. 22 simultaneous firings. Even if the Carthage moved, even if it displaced the map by the same method as before, 22 simultaneous events at different angles would saturate the spatial area. There was no displacement pattern that would take a 9-kilometer ship outside the combined radius. She was about to say this when the Carthage moved. Not toward the Dreth, laterally. And as it moved, it was broadcasting. The same open band format as before. The format that indicated a superior to inferior communication, but longer this time. A stream of data rather than a statement. Sane Ka's systems caught it, and her analyst team began processing it before she had to ask. What the Carthage was broadcasting to the Dreth formation was not a threat. It was an offer. She read it twice because the first time her translator rendered it, she was certain something had been lost. It said, "We have observed your operational doctrine. We have observed your weapon systems. We have modeled your targeting behavior across 116 recorded engagements in the Coalition war record. We know your fold compression units require a stable gravitational map. We know your map process takes 38 to 42 minutes and cannot be abbreviated without accuracy loss. We know your command doctrine requires weapon release authorization after mapping completion, before target displacement exceeds acceptable margin. You have 22 fold compression units in this formation. You calculated that 22 simultaneous firings at distributed angles would saturate the displacement margin. You are correct." It paused. "We would like you to understand that we know you are correct, and we would like you to understand that we prepared for this calculation before we arrived. Not because we are certain we can defeat your formation, because we are certain that whatever happens to this vessel in the next engagement will be observed by your command as a data point. We would like that data point to carry a specific message." Another pause. "Withdraw from this system. Withdraw from coalition space. We are telling you, plainly, that what follows this engagement will not be one ship. We came first, so you could see what one ship is. The answer to one ship is not 200. It stopped. The Dreth formation was very still. Seinka had her hands flat on her console, all four of them. Still as fear, the stillness she knew in herself, and usually disliked, and could not stop right now, because what she was watching was a 180-year-old warship transmitting a message to 211 enemy ships that said, in plain language, "We want you to understand who you are dealing with before you decide what to do next." She did not know if it would work. She did not know if any of this would work. The Dreth formation held for 9 minutes. 9 minutes was a very long time in tactical terms. In 9 minutes, a battle group could complete a weapons lock. An assault formation could advance from engagement range to close range. A fold compression unit could complete a third of its mapping pass. 9 minutes was long enough to do a great number of decisive things. The Dreth did none of them. The command vessel broadcast, short, tight, directed inward toward the formation, rather than outward toward the Carthage. The formation began to turn. Not all at once. It moved the way formations move when the order is reluctant. The leading elements first, the command vessel central, the trailing elements last. The fold compression units, especially slow, either due to positioning difficulty or the particular difficulty that weapon systems have being repositioned when they were prepared to fire and then ordered not to. But the whole formation moved, away from the Carthage, away from Thessia Station, back toward fold distance. 211 ships. Turning around, Seinka looked at the tactical display, and then looked at the wall for a moment, because the display was too much information all at once, and she needed somewhere to put her eyes that was not data. One coalition admiral, 4 hands moving without her permission, thinking fast, and feeling something she did not have a precise word for, because the word she had for it was from a language her grandmother had spoken, and it translated imperfectly as the feeling of a weight being partially lifted from a thing that has been under it so long it no longer knows how to hold itself without the weight. She called Marin Holt. "They're withdrawing," she said. "I know," Marin Holt said. "The message, the offer, you didn't expect that to work." The pause on the line. "No," Marin Holt said. "I expected them to advance. I prepared for them to advance. I would have preferred them to advance, honestly. We would have gotten better data." A pause. "But this is better for the coalition. If they pull back and report, their command has to deal with the uncertainty. A military that has won by advancing for 11 years has to explain why it did not advance. That is a different problem than losing ships. Ships can be replaced. Certainty is harder to rebuild." Valoran's voice came into the channel. He had been listening. "Captain, what you broadcast to them. The answer to one ship is not 200. "What did you mean?" Marin Holt was quiet for a moment. "I meant what I said," she said. "We came one ship first, so they could see what one ship is, so they could report it home, so their command could look at the numbers and ask the right question." Another pause. "The right question is not how many ships they need to defeat the Carthage. The right question is whether they want to find out what comes after the Carthage." "What comes after the Carthage?" Valoran asked. The line was very quiet. "Director Chen and I have been discussing that," Marin Holt said. "For the last 4 years. We did not want to commit forces to this conflict without knowing what we were committing to. Not because we did not care, but because we wanted to commit correctly. We've been building for it. Modifying platforms, reactivating systems that have been inactive for a very long time." Her voice was the same as it always was, even, clear. The voice of someone who had thought about a thing for a very long time, and was past the part where it was frightening, and into the part where it was simply work. "The Carthage is the beginning of what we send, Ambassador. It is not the whole of it, but we wanted the Dreth to see the beginning before they saw the rest. We wanted them to have time to make a choice." Valoran was quiet. Outside, the 211 Dreth ships were reaching fold distance, disappearing in groups. The sensor readings of 22 fold compression units going dark, powering down, retreating into fold space with the rest of the formation. Gone. "Will they take the choice?" Valoran asked. "Will they stop?" Marin Holt's answer came back clean and honest, the same as all her answers. "No," she said. "They'll come back, but they'll come back differently, carefully. And while they're being careful, We'll be building the answer to whatever they decide to do. She paused. That's how you end a war like this, Ambassador. Not in one engagement. You change the math, one engagement at a time, until the math stops working for them and starts working for you. The channel was quiet. Sain-Ka's fleet had come back into view of the station, all 47 ships in a formation that had not fired a shot, and had still, somehow, been part of the turning of 211 Dreth ships. She looked at the formation, looked at the space where the Dreth had been. She thought about 11 years. She thought about 412 worlds. She thought about the Vorith line and the Miran glass, and all the meetings where they had sat in the same room and tried to find a number that didn't end in the same place. And she thought about a 9-kilometer ship, older than their acquaintance with humanity, covered in scars, crewed by people who had spent 4 years watching from a distance and building the answer to a question they had decided to make their own. One ship. They had sent one ship, and then they had made the 211 go away. And behind the Carthage, somewhere in human space, there was more. Built, waiting. The thing that came after one ship. The thing that Marin Holt had described in the tone of a person describing a plan that was already finished. Sain-Ka had been in this war for 11 years. She had lost a great deal. She did not know if this was over. She did not know if it was winnable. She had spent 11 years learning not to trust the feeling that something had shifted because it had always unshifted. But her hands were moving. All 4 of them. Fast. 3 days later, a new signal came from humanity. Not from the Carthage, from Director Chen, from Seoul, from whatever office she worked in on a planet that Sain-Ka had never visited and was now very interested in visiting. It said, "The Coalition Assembly will shortly receive a formal proposal for a military alliance. This is not an offer of coalition membership and not a request for political integration. It is a military agreement with a military purpose. We are prepared to discuss terms at your convenience. Additionally, and this is separate from the alliance proposal, we are transmitting coordinates. These are locations in human space where the vessels we have been preparing are currently staged. There are also construction timelines." Sain-Ka pulled up the coordinates, pulled up the construction timelines, sat in her command chair for a long moment. "Vale Orin," she said on the open channel. Her voice was doing something she was not sure she had ever done with it before. "You should see these numbers." She heard him pull them up. She heard him go very quiet. Then she heard him breathe out, slowly, the long exhale of a man who had been holding something in his chest for 11 years and was beginning, carefully, to let it go. "These numbers are," he started. "Yes," Sain-Ka said. "This is." "Yes." Neither of them said the word. Outside, in the dark where the Dreth had been, the stars were very still. The front line was still moving, somewhere out past the edge of sensor range. The math was still the math, and the Dreth were still the Dreth, and 11 years of losing did not become 11 years of winning just because one ship had made 200 turn around. But the numbers in the transmission were real, and the Carthage was real. And 400 years from now, when whoever was left wrote the history of this war, Sain-Ka thought they would mark this week, this particular week. One ship arriving at a station that could not fit it, sending a shuttle, walking into a briefing room without ceremony. "Can we find somewhere with a large display? We'd like to show you what we're thinking." They would mark this as the week the math changed. Not fixed, not finished, changed. The direction of a thing, reversed. That was enough. That was, Sain-Ka thought, exactly what one ship was supposed to be for.